So we will real quick just look at the two competing understandings of the human person and then wrap it up with one slide on moral life and happiness. So there's nothing new on this slide. Again, it was the end of the presentation yesterday. So I'll bring everything else up, comment real briefly, and then from there we'll move on and wrap it up. What's important here is to really see the distinctions between these two. And once again, I realize that it could fall on cynical ears for me to say that the Catholic Church is an expert on the human person. But if you even look at the study of personhood, a lot of it was dependent on the Church's doctrines working out of Christ, how he's made of the same substance of the Father, yet different. So, a lot of that contributed to this. And again, they pull information from 300 BC, back with the post-Socratic philosophers. So, the Church's understanding, and again, all this can be shown philosophically. I could show these things without making reference to Revelation. We don't need to do that here. This is a Catholic school, and we can talk about it openly. But we believe a rational person, that you literally are not subject to your instincts. So we are not irrational animals. We can choose to go against the drives that are within us. I think that's a pretty high understanding of the human person. We have free will. We don't just believe everything is determined. I don't choose an apple and orange because of something deep-seated within either in my experience or my epigenetics. So there's something else there. So this also makes us culpable, right? Makes us responsible for our actions. We're incarnate. So it is not me inside of the body. This is me. It's an entire incarnated being. So we can't use excuses like, don't judge me like you would on the cover of a book. That's a very, very bad analogy, right? So intentions, when we get into the moral act, which will be in the next couple of weeks, that's important. But that doesn't determine our moral acts. We're relational. In other words, even deep within us, whether it be language or whether it be those things that help us move out towards another person, we always transcend ourselves. I have to be in relation with other people. It's part of my nature. I can't simply be independent. We don't simply choose to live together, in the words of John Locke, to help defend ourselves from marauders and the rest of the world. We come together because we need to be around people of our own kind to relate, to communicate, and such. We're contingent, so we rely on something other than us. We need not exist. This last one will be the good springboard, then the new stuff. Again, supernatural means we're supernaturally oriented, and I'm trying to differentiate that from you only live once. Now, somebody had a good question, first, second period, talked about, well, are you saying, because I remember I brought up the word bucket list, and they said, well, are you saying that the Catholic Church is opposed to bucket lists? And I said, well, that's an odd way to put it. And I would say, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that your goals and your list are going to orient your actions. So I'm not saying that somebody's so crass that if they have 10 things on their bucket list that they go after those things above all else. But what is on our bucket list? I mean, how nice would it be if we said, one of my goals is to be embedded in my community and help transform it, whatever my neighborhood is. I'm going to join the Lions Club, the Women's Library, association, or whatever. I want to see this flourish. That's a different type of bucket list than simply saying, well, I just want to make sure I go to Canada and see, the waterfalls or whatever particular destination you have. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the point. Remember, Mr. Ware said your goal in life and your tension is not going to be between good and evil. It's going to be between competing goods. So tonight, when I talk to the engaged couples, soon-to-be married couples, we'll have to explain that there are certain goals you will have in life that are going to bring you closer together or farther apart. There's not a lot of neutrality there. So the choices that we make often determine the trajectory off we go. So, for instance, you guys know St. Gianna Molla. All right, she died in childbirth, or within a day or so afterwards, from complications of childbirth. Now, her death was not necessary ethically according to the Catholic Church. She refused to have a hysterectomy because she did not want to place that child at risk. So when she was canonized, this is the only time it's happened in the Catholic Church, her husband, her children, and the daughter that was born, little Gianna, born from that incident, were all present in her canonization. So, I mean, what would have been her bucket list? Her family. Now, we're called to be saints. So there's nothing wrong with us saying, we have certain goals. Again, my wife always said she'd love to go to Israel or she'd love to go to Ireland. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we misinterpret our genuine ends and our genuine goods from those things, that's where our life gets disoriented. Yes, sir.
Why was she canonized?
Well, she was canonized. First of all, she lived a saintly life, so she had heroic virtue. But the actual miracle, if you want to say, was a woman who the placenta had, I believe, separated, or not separated, but it had ripped or torn, and there was zero chance of the child living within the womb. But without any medical explanation, the child was born, and everybody's fine. So.
I think you said he died.
No, she died.
Oh.
Yeah, she died because of the results of childbirth. All right. So anyway, now the reason why this last thing is a good spring off is let's talk about goals and happiness, and this will hopefully clear it up a little bit for us. And my throat is just terribly sore, so my apologies. So in our moral life is teleological, okay? And when we say that something is teleological, we're simply saying that it's goal-oriented, okay? So it's probably not half bad to talk about what are our goals. If our moral life is teleological, it simply means that our life is goal-oriented. Now these first few things that I'm giving you are going to sound stupid simple, but if we don't grasp these, and I'm telling you most of us do not, we will wind up going through what we would probably call some sort of conveyor belt in life. And you get up, you go to work, you come home, you eat, watch the news, go to bed, get up, go to work, come home, watch, and before you know it, 10 years goes by, and you think, what the heck did I do with myself? And so we're trying to orient what is it that we do with our lives and with our moral life. So it follows, if it's goal-oriented, it follows then that our actions and our life must also be goal-oriented. So if the moral life is teleological, which means it's goal-oriented, then our actions, our life, must be goal-oriented. Why are we doing that or pursuing that which we are? Again, I know it's going to sound obvious, but people don't do this. If our actions in our life are goal-oriented, that fundamentally implies that the goal must first be identified. What is your goal? Now, see, bucket lists are identified goals. So let's talk about what are our goals in a moral life. Once we identify that goal, our entire moral life should be oriented towards it. You see how simple that is? Once we identify the goal, our entire life shall be oriented towards it. So tonight, Mrs. Bujno is going to be coming with me to do this presentation. That's kind of neat because I've been doing these for probably 5+ years and she never came along, so I think it's going to work out tonight. When I'm talking to the engaged couples, how many times do personal goals, power, prestige, and money come between the couple? And that's a tragedy. If each of them look at each other and make two promises. One, divorce will never, ever be spoken. You don't even bring it up. And two, everything about my life will be oriented towards you. And then the wife turns to her let's say the woman turns towards her engaged boyfriend and says, everything in my life will be oriented towards you. Nothing will come before that. That is not a relationship that's going to go under. It's not. But, that's how simple it is. Identify a goal, work towards that goal. We just don't do it. We chase our own goals, and we're going to see that the goals we chase usually are lesser goals. They seem like they're good at the time, and they aren't good, but they seem like that they're paramount, and then we realize they didn't bring us the happiness we thought, okay? So anyway, once we identify that goal, we orient towards it. The goal of the moral life, that to which all actions are aimed. I'll let you write that, and then I have something to add to that. The goal of the moral life, that to which all actions are aimed. It's going to sound a little awkward, but I'll clear it up. Have to be that one thing sought after for its own sake. And I'll give you examples. They have to be that one thing sought after for its own sake. They have to be the one thing sought after for its own sake. Happiness is that one thing. You could really just stop there. Because the only thing to add to that is for its own sake. Happiness is that one thing.
I'm sorry, can you?
Yes. Actions are aimed at that one thing sought after for its own sake. It's not a means to an end. It's the end, okay? The goal. Happiness is that. But the problem is we're not going to know what happiness is. But let me just give you examples on this before we move on. Here's how we know that happiness is the ultimate goal. Because if I were to say to you, I really hope I'm happy so I win the lottery. That sounds almost silly, doesn't it? Because we all know that it's more likely I'm going to find happiness by winning the lottery. So to say I hope I hope I'm happy so I win the lottery, happiness is not a step to the next thing. If I were to say to you, I really wish I was happy, because then I'd be healthy. It just sounds awkward. You would want me to say, or at least it would sound clear for me to say, I wish I were healthy, then I'd be happy. All right? So we know that there's happiness as this end goal. It's not a means to the next thing. Our problem is we cannot clearly identify what it is. So let's start by identifying what it is, and then we're going to say what the counterfeits are. Genuine happiness. And by the way, before you think this is simply a Christian or a Catholic thing, the ancient Greeks said this was the purpose of life. And they used the word eudaimonia. They said because there's nothing else that we seek once we have had happiness. Now, it's to be understood as blessedness, all right? Now, that's not necessarily a religious term, but anybody who is translating the text from Aristotle, when the word eudaimonia shows up, they write blessedness. Why? Because in the last decades, 3, 4, 5 decades, the word happiness has really, really just lost all its luster. We're not quite sure what that means. So I'm going to give you the counterfeit. But let me just say something. I'm not a counselor, right? But a friend of mine was struggling with things their kid were doing, and they wanted to talk about it. So she says to me, I don't know how to reach them. All I want is for my child to be happy. Isn't that what every parent wants? And I said, I don't know what that is. Excuse me? I said, well, you just said I want my child. What does that mean? I mean, it could mean something to me. I know what it means to me. And it sounds right, because it sounds nice. I mean, who's going to say, I want my child to be sad? I mean, nobody's going to say that. So if they want them to be happy, that's a good thing. Only we haven't identified what that is. We don't even really know what it is. So what I want to do is tell you, in the secular culture, we have different understandings of happiness. Yeah, Jack.
Could you just repeat that?
Which one here?
Yeah.
Oh, as blessedness. Just the word blessedness.
The first one, happiness is the one thing that is.
Well, I'll just put it this way. When I sit up here, that happiness is the one that, we have to seek something that's sought after for its own sake. It is happiness. Okay, I could probably take off whatever's after that. It is happiness. So let me give you 3, what we'll call, deficient understandings of happiness. One is people interpret happiness as whatever brings us pleasure. Okay, that's the first one. And you don't need to know it, but this is like an Immanuel Kant thing. Okay. In other words, what brings you pleasure? I want to have pleasure in my life, and if I have pleasure, I'll be happy, right? Because usually when people have pleasure, they're kind of like nicer, they leave you alone. But the problem is we don't really know what brings you pleasure if it's going to be the same thing that brings me pleasure. And do you seek your pleasure at the risk of somebody else's displeasure? I mean, it's very hard to work this out. So the second thing would be subjective contentment. In other words, I just want to have a general sense of being content. If I could just get a college degree, that would make me happy. Well, would it? Maybe somebody wants a PhD. How do you know it's going to make you happy? Sometimes asking for things at Christmas, you're awfully content when you open it up and you have a new iPhone or whatever. You're not content for very long, are you? Or you're only content until the next new thing comes along. Okay? So the first thing was just simply, it's an understanding of bringing one pleasure. The second one is subjective contentment. The third one is well-being. Okay? In other words, I want a certain quality of life, and that would make me happy. So you see that as a term used, say, in positive psychology. So what's wrong with, wanting well-being? Well, nothing. But the problem is all these things are subjective, okay? That's the problem with them. They are all subjective. I thought I had something up on screen that said that. Yeah, they're all subjective goals, okay? So we don't really know what to make of it. What brings you pleasure, what makes you content, or what is well-being in your life is not necessarily going to be the same thing as it would be for me. So how could it be the end? How can it be that thing at the end that we're all seeking? How could it be eudaimonia? Well, it really can't, all right? So the problem then, and this is the last point, is when it comes to the Christian faith. If we have these poor understandings of happiness and we don't have clear goals for what life is, then we're going to apply all those deficient understandings of happiness to our faith. We will look for a faith that brings us pleasure. We will look for a faith that makes us content. We will look for a faith that seems to contribute to our well-being. So in the end, what do you have? You have a therapeutic religion. It's a religion that just pacifies you, makes you feel better. So some of these guys on TV, that when they preach, if you want to say that, they're really saying, I want you to be the best that you can be. God wants the best for you that there is. Really? Have they read the same scriptures we've read?
So Catholicism doesn't seek to fulfill any of those goals?
Well, it's fine. All those goals are fine. Remember I told you, you're not talking about goods and evils, you're talking about competing goods. So there's nothing wrong with being content. There's nothing wrong with well-being. There's nothing wrong with seeking pleasure. But they are subjective. They cannot be a goal for the moral life. All right? So if somebody steps up and then says, well, look, my church, because what happens is we're talking in the framework of Christianity. Some denominations are not going to place demands on the individual. Because remember, we get a lot to recall here. Remember we talked about a freedom that imposes restrictions on us is seen as, that lack of restraint. We don't see that as genuine freedom. So we are seeking what we would call shallow pleasures. In other words, it might be the same thing as somebody who they don't feel good about themselves, so they seek little mini victories, right? You might actually have pleasure in rising above somebody else at somebody else's expense. That might bring you pleasure. And you might say, well, I'm happy. I rose in a company, okay, so I didn't do everything perfect, but that's not the moral life. So no, it's not that the Catholic Church says that those things are bad. They just can't be the same thing as what we'd understand happiness or eudaimonia. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
So what you have then is you have people who are placing very few demands on you, and it's attractive. So we're really, looking for a faith that's an entertainment. Or we're looking for a spirituality that makes no demands on us, but yet feels like we're tapping into something. And then you come to Christianity. I mean, think about if we had to make brochures to hand out to offer somebody and to join what we would call Catholicism and Christianity. We'd like you to sell everything you have. Don't give it to us, give it to the poor. And then come follow us, take up your cross because you're going to suffer, and we can't really offer you anything except in the end, you'll have blessedness with the Trinity. That's not exactly something you're going to go out and recruit people. It's a lot easier to bring people in, make very few demands on them, and appeal to them in a way that's going to make them feel good. This is not my philosophy, by the way. This is, well worked out by many different people. We wind up with our religion as just therapeutic. What is it for me? How does it work in my life? I'm fine. I'm content. Well, my quality of life's not so bad. As long as I get enough pleasure, more pleasure than pain. Okay, that type of stuff. So the demands here are a little bit different. So, and just before I wrap it up, this has nothing to do with your notes, but I don't even know who quoted it. I keep trying to find it, because I know I didn't come up with it. We have work, we have play, and we have worship. We've always had these three categories. And work has always been work, play has been play, and worship has been worship. But we've kind of mixed them up. So now people at worship want to play. And people that work want to worship. And people that play want to work. Let's face it, our sideline things that we do for entertainment sometimes are more work than people do during the day. We don't even work hard enough during the day that we have to have gyms at the end of the day. And when we go to worship, we really want it to be more play. And when we go to work, that's really our God. So we've kind of misaligned these three things, right? So all this does is this reorients all that and said, what is the one thing that you would go after for its own sake? That's the goal. And then go after that. Any questions? Yeah.
Could you explain more about the true state, or getting to the true state of happiness?
Yeah, well, we haven't really talked about it, so that may not be clear. But what it would be is, obviously, in the moral life, you have to go back to our definition of morality, right? So we're identifying goods, and we're pursuing those goods. So part of it would be, look at the goods and the counterfeits good. Do I appreciate beauty, or do I seek titillation? Do I appreciate wisdom, or do I seek cleverness? Okay? Cleverness and titillation could always bring pleasure, well-being, and also can bring contentment, but those are not going to be true goods. So then we'd also say, well, how to live the virtues, right? So if we get into virtue theory, which I'm not sure if we will, we'll talk about faith, hope, and love, the theological virtues. We'll also talk about the cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, temperance, and, oh my God, my mind's gone. Prudence, justice, temperance, and my mind's totally gone. I'm not going to try to think of it. And we would work towards those, right? So in other words, in every situation, we would try to be just in our temperance. In our lives, with food and sex, we'd be temperate. So all those. And then, because this is theology, grace imbues all of those. So it's the life of Christ reorienting us. So all of a sudden, the goals all turn. And then you go back to understanding the human person and walk your way down those 5 criteria, and you realize that everything's oriented towards something outside of us. Right? I don't know if that helps, but what do you got?
A quick follow-up.
Yeah, sure. Anytime.
When Mr. Ware, when Mr. Father Ware was teaching.
Yeah, Mr. Ware. He's
Mr.
not
Ware.
Father Ware yet. Yeah, go ahead.
When he was teaching, he mentioned that any true fulfillment is entirely oriented towards God. Does that fall?
Well, maybe. Okay, it could be that. Here's the thing. If there's there's a book by Mortimer J. Adler called The 6 Great Ideas, and the first 3 are truth, beauty, and goodness. These are the ways we know everything. So when people say, is something true because God wills it? It's the command theory. Does he just will it to be true? Or because it's true, he wills it? Well, both of those categories are kind of like a false binary. Beauty, truth, and goodness are fulfilled in him as a person. So anybody, whether they hold a faith or not, their participation in those ideas of beauty, truth, and goodness are somehow participation in an aspect of him. Okay? So it's not, it sounds systematic when we say you go after these things and by that way you find God, but these things are ultimately found in God. It's interesting, I was just reading something the other day, had nothing to do with theology, but they were talking, it was almost like what was it? I guess it's like the moral argument for God. We can use it that way. No matter if you say somebody's tall, that's only relative to something else. right? So, I might be tall if I'm in a room of fifth graders. I'm not going to be tall if I'm in a room of adults, okay? If we say something's beautiful, there has to be an ultimate beauty. If we say something's true, there has to be an objective truth we're comparing it to. It can't just be, nobody would say, well, this is more true than that. We might say it's more correct, but we'd say, well, it's more true. I mean, because it's either true or it's not. If we say something, with love, now we're talking about something that's endemic of the person. So, to say that we pursue these things, this is where the Catholic understanding of, and really the Orthodox are more adamant with it, that this is us becoming like gods. So this idea of I get to heaven is a poor understanding of the goal of life. It's not like a territory that you're able to step into. It's being drawn into somebody in love. And that's why I think relations are the best understanding. When you're dating somebody, and then if you're married to somebody, to the depths that your relationships are together. You wouldn't say, if I do this, I'm going to get closer to being with her. You wouldn't say that, even though that might be true. If I give myself, faithfully to her, it's going to draw our love together. That's our understanding of salvation. It's just not always articulated well, and we do a bad job of that sometimes. Good questions. Anybody else?
All right.